Alright, Andy, this is your training video for the Lancair. So I want to go over a couple things. One obviously is the panel, and you pretty much know the panel, but I usually take the key and I put it in the pocket right here. You'll also find your altimeter coordination checklist and your fuel gauge. But anyway, here's the key. The key goes in, and you know all these instruments, so we don't need to go over that. Transfer pump comes on when you run the fuel, when you're running the fuel up to the tank. But we'll just start from one side to the left. So usually when I get in, I turn on the parking brake. So parking brake's on, and then you pump the brakes, and then it's on, and then off is like that. But basically, when you don't want to push the brakes and pull this, so it's pull on, and then a couple of pumps, and that locks your brakes. So now you got your brakes set. Gear lights. This is gear up, gear down. Your comm nav. Not sure what this does. This says RNAV auxiliary. Not sure what that does. This dims the lights. Radio. You know, all this fun stuff. So you've got your boost pump. I don't ever use the boost pump. A lot of people do, but I don't. But you can run your boost pump on takeoff and landing. Cabin heat, your primer. I usually use 1 to 2 pumps before you start it, so I bring it out, all the way out, and it's pretty snug, so it takes a little pulling, and then all the way in, like that. Your carb heat, this is your mixture, throttle, and this is your, so it's got auto and manual for the empty propeller. So as you can see, I always leave it in auto, but if you want to turn it into manual, then you actually have to manually control your RPM. So you can, let's say you want to fly at 2400 in manual, you just run this 20 until it hits 24. And then when you want to go back into auto, then you can dial this to 2400 RPM. So basically, manual is up and down, auto is by dial. And when I take off, I usually run it right about there, and that'll put you right at, I think the max is 2800 RPM on this airplane. So you want to have 2800 RPM for takeoff. And I usually do it 1 or 2 back. What will happen is you'll get a red light warning on takeoff, and this, anytime you get the red light, just hit acknowledge. So acknowledge means I acknowledge the red light goes off, so it's not bothering you. So yeah, acknowledge on and off. So set prop, you'll see the green light come on, which is a cycle. This trims you left and right, so you got your left and right trim. These are your flaps, flaps up, flaps down. In order to do reflex flaps, you have to hold this in and then do that, and that will put you in the negative reflaps. So don't ever use your flaps above, I think it's 110. So I wouldn't run your flaps 110 or 120 miles an hour. So when you level off before you speed up, put in your negative reflex and then go ahead and speed up. And then to bring the negative reflex out, you just run this down. There is a button under here. I never used it, but I think that's the automatic release for the autopilot. So if you're flying and you need to automatically release the autopilot, you press that, and it disengages the autopilot so you can fly. But I think that's what that button is. I never used it. And then you've got all your fun stuff over here, your full engine monitoring system. This is when this flashes, that means you'll have an electrical problem. I guess I'll just do a quick startup here for you. So what I do is, let's see here. Okay, so brake is set, and I pump the brakes. Primer, I've already primed it, and mixture is full. Throttle is cracked, so we'll crack it, and I'll just shut it off once it starts so that you can hear me talking. Prop is set. Breakers set. Check. So all my breakers are checked. Yep, all breakers in. Master on. And clear prop. When it starts, then I go on, avionics on, roll this back, green light, all good, oil pressure, oil temps coming up, all EGTs, all CHTs, that's your amps and volts. So it's 1213 manifold pressure, 1000 RPM. That's your amps and volts. It's running -6 amps and volts, and this is your CHT EGT, and you can thumb through different screens. That's all your EGTs and EGTs, so you can read the manual on that. Green lights for gear, and when you run the left and right tanks, you'll see this light come on. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. So that's the startup procedure for it. Okay, this is trim. So when you take off by yourself, it's a little different. So I usually trim it back for takeoff with just by myself, about like that. And then when I have a passenger, it's about like that. So you can kind of get a feel for it. When you're flying this, your hand will be on here and here. So right on takeoff, I automatically just trim it perfectly. And when I'm on takeoff, to climb out at 140 miles an hour. That's usually the climb out speed. So basically, once I do my run up and check everything and I'm out there, takeoff procedure basically is full mixture, full prop, flaps up. Always have flaps up on takeoff, never do. These planes you never take off with partial flaps. They're always flaps up on takeoff for the Lancair. We'll go over emergency procedures later, but okay, so on takeoff, basically depart at 140 miles an hour. I basically, just apply a little rear pressure, and as I'm taking off, as soon as I lift up, it's gear up and trim for a nice 140 mile an hour climb out. And then once I'm climbing out, I usually lean it just slightly to hit a peak EGT of around 1300 on climb out. So I don't touch my throttle. I don't touch my RPM on climb out until I hit altitude. I leave it all alone. The only thing I'll do is lean out EGT until altitude. So it likes about anything above 6,000. It runs really, really smooth up there. You'll be at higher altitudes. So for level off, it's basically level off, trim for level, and then you can either fly 25 and 25. If you want to get there fast, that's what gets its top speed. Or if you want to go slow and do economy, then what I do is I roll my prop back to 25. So I would never really fly this except on climb out at full RPM. As soon as you're level and flying, always turn it to 2,500 RPM. That's what you're going to want to usually fly it at, 2,500. Or if there's people that do 23 and 23. It just depends on how you fly the plane. But I fly at 2,500, and then I can usually leave the manifold pressure at 25. Or if I'm at altitude, it's automatic anyway. So you're leveled out. You set your prop and your mixture. You adjust that however you want to adjust your mixture. And one thing too is always make sure that when you're descending and you're going to land, I always like to have full weight forward in the forward fuel tank. So what I do is when I'm on my descent, I usually run my fuel pumps until it gets to there. Remember that you're pointed down, so this sight will be different when you level out. So you don't want to top it off too much because you're leaning forward, and as soon as you do that, then the tank is kind of overflowed. So don't run it all the way to the top when you're angled down. So what I do is I always fly with my fingers on this too. So I'm going to switch hands for the camera. So I'm always flying like this when I'm running my pumps, just so I don't forget. So I usually don't take my fingers off of that until I actually turn it off, because if you forget, it hasn't happened to me, but the owner that built this said that the gas will come out of the top and actually go on your windshield, and that's a perfect reminder that you've overflowed it. Never done it, but that's what he says it happens. Okay, so emergency procedure. Down here is your fuel cutoff. So if you need to shut your fuel off, you pull that straight over like that, and that's emergency fuel cutoff. Hydraulic is right here. So let's say emergency gear procedure is, gear down. That didn't work. And so you look back here and you see these breakers. So you lean back like this and turn the breakers off. So breaker off, and then those are off right there. I'm going to turn them back on so I don't forget. So breakers off, and then you come forward and you basically pull this knob up, and that releases the hydraulic pressure. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to collapse the gear, but what happens is you pull that up, the gear free falls out. they drop out and lock. If they don't drop out and lock, kick your rudders left and right. Make sure you're level and make sure that you're at 100. It helps. The slower you go, the better it is for the gear to come out. So emergency procedure: slow down, level out, gear down, hit the breaker. If that didn't work, drop a gear, kick rudder left and right, and that should shake the gear out left and right. You'll get full greens. And then when it does go full green, put your hydraulic pressure back down and land. You don't want to leave this up and land because your gear will collapse. So you want to put the hydraulic pressure back on. They'll lock out anyway, so I don't want to say that they won't collapse. But that's pretty much the emergency procedures for it. And I've gone over everything. And if there's anything you can think of, let me know. I'll do a quick video walk around for you on the airplane too, and try to show you anything about it. So that's that. Okay, on to the next video.